Hi everyone, welcome back. In today's video we're diving into the names used for God across Judaism, Christianity and Islam. I'm not going to read the full description for each one, so if you'd like more details feel free to pause the video and read what's on the screen for anything I didn't cover. Please stick around to the end because I've got an eye-opening clip from a Jewish researcher who has uncovered some groundbreaking insights about the missing vowels in the Tetragrammaton, the mysterious four-letter name for God. Let's get started. Okay, so first we have the name Elohim. Elohim is a plural word, meaning gods. Christians either tend to ignore that this means gods, or they use it as a way to justify their Trinitarian belief. While it's plural in form, it's singular in concept. In biblical Hebrew, many singular abstractions are expressed in a plural form. For example, Rahamim, which means compassion. Okay, so next we have the names El, Eloi, and Eli. The name Eloi is the name that Jesus cried out in Matthew 27 verse 46. The Greek word Eli is a transliteration of the Hebrew compound Eli and Eloi of the Aramaic Elahi, which is the name El, or God, suffixed with the possessive Yod, meaning of me. Here we have the name for God Adonai. Adonai is the plural of the Hebrew word Adon, which means Lord or Master. Next we have the names Elah and Elaha. Elah, the corresponding Aramaic form is Elah, but its emphatic state is Elaha. It is written as Elaha in the biblical Aramaic and Allaha in Syriac, both simply meaning God. Here we have the Arabic name for God, Allah. The word Allah is found in the Quran, and the word most commonly used by the Muslims. The word is thought to be derived by a contraction from the word Al-Ilah, which means the God, and is linguistically related to the Aramaic words Elah and Syriac Allaha, and the Hebrew word El, which means God. Here we have the Hebrew word Hashem. Hashem is a title used for God in Judaism, which means the name. So to understand why the Jews refer to God by the title Hashem, that simply means the name, we must look at the name of God found in the Torah that now only consists of 4 Hebrew letters, where the vowels are missing. Those 4 letters, Yud, He, Vav, He, are referred to as the Tetragrammaton. The vowels were purposely left out of this name for God long ago due to the leaders of Judaism deeming God's name too holy to say, which has meant that most people believe that today we cannot be sure of what the name actually is, which is why the Jews use the title Hashem, meaning the name. Most people, the Jews and Christians, think the 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton would have originally been for the name Yahweh, and the Jehovah's Witnesses believe it would have been Jehovah. Which leads to me showing you clips from a video I found while researching the Tetragrammaton, a video where Jewish researchers looked into very old texts to see what ancient rabbis knew about God's name and its full form, and if it has been truly lost. I thought what he found was very interesting and it leads to an interesting conclusion, so I'm going to share that information. Let's look and listen to what he found.
Ladies and gentlemen, we don't give you one verse answers here. And so this is for those who really want to know the truth. If you're just into religion, you probably have already turned the channel. We're back with Nehemia Godon this week, and he is going to be revealing things from ancient Hebrew sources, ancient Hebrew documents, manuscripts that have never been translated. In fact, they have never even been printed in Hebrew. Take us into the sources.
But I never even really asked the question, what do the rabbis say the name? And it is a good question. We have an actual conspiracy that's described in the Babylonian Talmud, the Tractate of Kedushin 71a, and it's brought, we even have the name of the head conspirator. His name is Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. It's kind of a hard name to say. Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. And he lived around the year 250 to 300 AD. And he says as follows. He said, sages transmit the 4-letter name to their disciples once in a 7-year period. So what he's describing is, by the year 250, Jews were no longer commonly speaking the name. It had been forbidden by the Romans, and there was an internal reason to suppress people healing in the name. That's really interesting. We talked last week how there were both Jews and probably also Jews who believed in Yeshua who were healing in the name of the Father, YHWH, and the rabbis wanted to suppress this, the Romans wanted to suppress this, so everybody was happy, right? But the rabbis still preserved this name, and they preserved it by transmitting it from rabbi to disciple once every 7 years. So, And what I knew is that the rabbis in the Talmud in the year 250 AD are telling us they transmit the name every 7 years. But the reason scholars will plumb the depths of every pagan source for the pronunciation of the name is they don't believe what the Talmud says. They say, come on, the rabbis didn't really transmit the name once every 7 years. Surely if they did that, we'd find traces of it in later Jewish sources, right? And where are those traces? Meaning, we have over 100,000 Jewish books. I mentioned to you, I have a database with over 100,000 Jewish books. It came out of Bar-Ilan University, costs about $1,000 with all the updates. And scholars at Bar-Ilan University have been typing in Jewish books since the 1970s. To the point where they've gotten to so many books, you can do a search, and you're not looking at all of Jewish literature, but you're looking at a large percentage of every Jewish book that's ever been written. It might be, and I don't know the number, but it's somewhere between 25 and 75% of all Jewish books ever written that have survived, let's put it that way. There's other books in manuscript that have never been printed. There's other books that, they'll eventually get to, right? So I get this database, and I'm asking the question, are there any rabbis who say what the name is? And I think, I don't think there are. If there were, I would have heard about it, right? If somebody's writing a paper, a serious paper in a scholarly journal about how the Gnostic pronounced the name, and I've never read a paper, and I've read, I think, everything there is on the name, just about, in academic scholarship, surely somebody would have published this, right? It must be there, and I would know about it. So I put in it's a flash drive, I put it in, it's all in Hebrew. Even the interface is in Hebrew, it doesn't say search, it says chapes, right? So I type it in, and I do a little search, and I'm like, I know I'm not gonna find it. Within 30 seconds, I found a rabbi who said the name is Yehovah. The name, the Shema Mefurash, the explicit name, the unequivocal name, is with the vowels Shva, Cholam, Kamat, and you're going to hear that, guys, over and over today. Shva is that little E in Yehovah, Cholam is the O, and the Kamat is the A. So this rabbi says unequivocally, without a question, he says the vowels of the name, which are Shva, Cholam, Kamat. He states it matter-of-factly.
So Nehemia Godon here, a Jewish researcher, is saying that when he's looked back at these old texts from these ancient rabbis, God's name was actually Yehovah and not Yahweh, which means that the Jehovah's Witnesses are pretty much correct. I'll talk about this more at the end of the video.
And what it made me realize is if I could find it in 30 seconds, and nobody's ever talked about this that I've ever read in scholarship, they're talking about the Gnostics, and they're talking about the Greek magical papyri, but not this source, that means nobody's ever looked. Because if they'd looked, they would have found it in 30 seconds. Maybe it would have taken them 5 minutes. I'm good.
Nice.
But literally nobody's ever looked to see what do the rabbis say the name is, and why don't they look? So the reason they don't look, and I looked this up in Hebrew Jewish sources, you can't blame the pagans or the Christians or the agnostics for this. This is Jewish Israeli sources, an encyclopedia in Hebrew. And it's saying our rabbis, these are Orthodox Jews writing, saying our rabbis didn't know how to pronounce the name. And they give the source. So what do? I'm a troublemaker. I look up the source. And you know what the source is, Michael? It's a source from around 1750 from a rabbi named Elijah of Vilna. Let me read you what it says. So he says, the vowels of the name itself are hidden. Its vowels are the secret of the Tetragrammaton. Okay, so we know that. Meaning the consonants of the Tetragrammaton of the name, YHWH, of the name of the Father, that's not even a question. They're Yud, He, Vav, He. The vowels are the secret of the Tetragrammaton, and he says the vowels of the name itself are hidden. So the modern 20th century encyclopedia written in Hebrew by rabbis say, well, the rabbis didn't know what the vowels were. Is that what he says? No, he says they're hidden.
Right.
He doesn't say he doesn't know what they are. And so what I do is I look up the source, and it doesn't say what they claim it says. Now, if that was all the information, you could argue back and forth. Did the rabbis know what the name was, or didn't they know what the name was, right? I mean, here's a rabbi who says it's hidden. Is it hidden to him, or is it just hidden to the public? So, and they transmitted it every 7 years. Surely there must be a trace of that somewhere in Jewish literature. And so I heard about this book of the divine name, and what it describes in it is the exact type of thing described in the Talmud, but 1,000 years later. A ceremony of transmitting the name.
1,000 years after.
1,000 years after Rabbi Bar Bar Chana saying, sages transmit the name to their disciples, we see how this was done by this rabbi in 1225. And what he describes is this elaborate ceremony. And in the elaborate ceremony, you have a rabbi and a disciple who go through a purification process. They fast and they immerse themselves in a mikveh of water. and then they don white clothing, and then they do something a little bit strange at first until you read it in Hebrew. And by the way, it was printed for the first time in 2004 after nearly 800 years, and it's never been translated into English. In fact, the general public will hear this text for the first time ever in English. If I read you a little excerpt here, it's never been translated into English. One of the part of the ceremony is they stand up to their ankles in water. Seems really strange. And it talks earlier in the ceremony, they reveal the name over water. There's a strange ceremony taking place related to water. They're immersing in water, and they're standing in water, and so what does this mean? So it says as follows. It says, the rabbi will then open his mouth after all this preparation in awe and say, "Blessed are you," and then he speaks the name. Yehovah, our God, King of the universe, Yehovah, God of Israel, you are one and your name is one. And Michael, you are one and your name is one. That's a reference to Zechariah 14, verse 9. And it shall come to pass that Yehovah will be king over the entire earth. And on that day, Yehovah will be one, and his name will be one. And when he says it in the ceremony, he doesn't say, "Blessed are you, Adonai." He says, "Blessed are you," and he says the actual name, Yehovah. He says, "Blessed are you, our God, King of the universe, Yehovah, God of Israel. You are one, and your name is one." And he says, "You commanded us to hide your great name." Where did he command that? That's in the oral tradition, right? And so as part of that tradition, we have to hide the name, but we're not blotting out the name, so we're transmitting it to our disciples. Now, I could stop here, but there's another source that confirms this. And this is a source that was written in Hebrew around the year 1450 by a little-known rabbi in Jerusalem named Joseph ibn Sayach. And he wrote a book that's never been printed, even today. So if you wanted to read this in Hebrew, there's only one place you can find it. And I actually have here the manuscript, a photo of the manuscript. And I've actually highlighted the section I'm going to translate now. But here's a section from the manuscript. And this is interesting, this manuscript. This is the copy written by Joseph ibn Sayach. Not only was it never printed, but it was never even copied.
This is the original.
This is the original by the author. There's only one copy that ever existed, and we have his copy. And in this book, he answers a series of questions that people sent him as letters. And they'd say, "Look, Rabbi, we have a question. We need you to give us a binding answer. We have a problem in our community." And this is question number 43. I don't even know what question 1 through 42 are, but it's about 100 questions or something in this book. It's very common. So question number 43 that they sent to Ibn Sayach in the 15th century in Jerusalem, and they say as follows: "A certain sage has been uttering the name according to its letters, and a certain rabbi rebuked him for this. But the sage was stubborn in his actions." So what they're describing here is they're saying, "Rabbi, help us. There's a sage in our community who's speaking the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And our local rabbi, the leader, rebuked him, and he says, 'I don't care what you say, I'm a sage. You might be a rabbi, but I'm whatever a sage meant.'" It's an interesting question. It may have meant he was some kind of mystic, maybe, I don't know. So he's being rebuked for speaking the name, this rabbi whose name we don't know, and that shows you somebody knew how to speak the name in the 15th century. But I thought the Jews don't know the name. But here we have one source of a rabbi transmitting the name to his disciple. And the second case, not only does the rabbi receive the name from his rabbi, but he's speaking it out loud and getting in trouble for it. And the interesting thing is Ibn Sayach rebukes the sage for speaking the name. He says, "You're sinning. You're not allowed to speak this name. It's forbidden by our tradition, not by the Torah, by our tradition." So what we've established here is that the rabbis did know how to pronounce the name. So what we established up until now is there's Jewish sources that say we know what the name is. They don't tell us how it was pronounced. So I found sources where it does have the pronunciation of the name. And as I told you, the first one I found was one that took me 30 seconds to find once I looked. Before I didn't look, I didn't know about it, didn't really even think about it. But once I asked the question, I was able to find a rabbi within 30 seconds who unequivocally said the name was Yehovah. Now the other ones, I spent months searching and researching, which is how the name is written in Hebrew manuscripts. And in Hebrew manuscripts, as of today, I have 52 manuscripts where the name is written as Yehovah. But
manuscripts of the
Bible. Of the Bible itself. And to me, one manuscript of the Bible written by the scribes who preserved the oracle of God are more important than a million rabbis. But it's worth seeing what these rabbis say, because the claim is, well, no Jew ever thought it was Yehovah. Well, let's see what the rabbis say. Let the rabbis speak.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that has been taught in the Western Gentile Christian world is that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, that they inserted the vowels of Adonai in it. That's right. It's not true. It's just plain not true at all.
It's not true at all, and it's not what the rabbis thought either. We have 10 rabbis, technically 16, who say the name is Yehovah. I could have never found this if I didn't have a database that allowed me to search for certain things. And I'll tell you, Michael, I searched those databases for Yahweh, and I couldn't find it. But what I did find is rabbis repeatedly saying that the name is Yehovah. Mm-hmm. And we were never meant to know this. You and I sitting here were never meant to know this.
The rank-and-file Jew is never supposed to even hear that.
And certainly not a Gentile. And if I had to read 100,000 books, that probably would have never happened, and I wouldn't know this. And I would go around saying what scholars, as you said, for centuries have been saying, which is, well, the Jews didn't know how to pronounce the name. We find it in the manuscripts, but after that it disappeared and nobody knew how to pronounce the name. And what we find is, in fact, this was preserved by the rabbis. Maybe not all the rabbis, but we have rabbis who preserve. I want to read one of these sources. And so one of them is a rabbi in the 14th century named Menachem Tzioni. And he writes a commentary, and in his commentary in Exodus 3:15, which is the verse where God reveals his name, and he's commenting on the words, Zeh Shmi Le'olam, this is my name forever. And this is what he says. He says there's also a secret here received by tradition in the vowels of, this is my name forever. What does that mean? Well, you read it in Hebrew, it's obvious. The word forever is Le'olam, and you can see here, I have a graphic that illustrates this. Le'olam has the same vowels as Yehovah, which are the vowels Shva, Cholam, Kamatz. And this is what it looks like in English, Le'olam, Yehovah. He's telling us the statement, this is my name forever, is itself a hint at the true pronunciation of the name. Now, is that what God meant when he said to Moses, this is my name forever? I don't think so. But the rabbi this rabbi in the 14th century, Menachem Tzioni, he's saying, look, I know the secret. I received it from another rabbi who whispered it to me in my ear or over water or whatever. And the way we remember this is the verse, this is my name forever, which has the vowels of the pronunciation of the name. And he says its mnemonic is, who in heaven can measure up to you? A mnemonic is an acronym that helps you remember something. And the mnemonic, who in heaven can measure up to you, the word there that's the mnemonic is the word heaven, which normally is the word shamayim, but in this verse the word is shachak. And you say, well, what is that? What's the answer? Well, shachak is an acronym for the vowels Shva, Cholam, Kamatz, which are the vowels of the name Yehovah. And I did a thing here where in this graphic you can see the little two dots underneath the yud. That's called a Shva in Hebrew. And then the second vowel there is called a Cholam, and the third is a Kamatz. And if you take the first letter of each of those words, and technically in English it's the first two letters of Shiva, but in Hebrew that's one letter, Shin, the names of these vowels form the acronym Shachak, which means heaven. So the rabbi has told you it's the vowels of the word Le'olam, it's the vowels that are represented by the word Shachak, and this is the same rabbi. Here's what the rabbi says. He's told you it's the vowels of Le'olam, he tells you it's the vowels Shva, Cholam, Kamatz. He says that in third time, which I'm skipping to save time here. And then he says, thus far the words of the man who revealed the secret to me. I got the chills when I read that. He's telling us he stood by a riverside with his ankles up to the water or something like that. I don't know if it was exactly that, but he participated in the chain of transmission. And he tells us that this was received by tradition. And this was revealed to him as a secret by some man. We don't know what man. But he received this as a tradition that the true pronunciation of the name is Yehovah, and the way he was told to remember it is these mnemonics and other devices. It helps us preserve the vowels. So if we know that the acronym is Shachak, which is Shva, Cholam, Kamatz, and it rhymes with the vowels of Le'olam, which is Yehovah, there's no way you can get it wrong. And he's telling us, I didn't make this up. This was revealed to me in the 14th century. And this is just one rabbi of 16 that I've discovered so far. There might be more. But so, the background to the next one, this rabbi is a rabbi who wrote in 1608. His name is Shabtai Sofer. He's considered the greatest grammarian of the 17th century and the 16th century. So this is what he says in 1608. He writes this, he has published this in a book. He writes this in a letter to another rabbi, and it was never meant to be printed, but it was. So he writes this as a letter, and we have the letter, and we have the response to the letter, which I'll get to in a few minutes. He says, is it not known, the saying of the sages? And he quotes that passage. In this world it's written Yudevave and read Adonai. In the world to come it will be written Yudevave and read Yudevave. And then he says, and behold, when it is read as Yudevave in the world to come, then its vowels will be Shachak. And remember, Shachak is an acronym for Shva, Cholam, Kamatz, the vowels that form in Hebrew Yehovah. It's beautiful. He's not, I mean, it's amazing. And it's interesting. So he's a grammarian, and as a grammarian, he's asking the question, why do we have vowels in a word that we don't read? Because by Jewish tradition, we don't read the word Yud-Hey-Vav-Hey. When we see that word, we read it as Adonai. Well, are those the vowels of Adonai? It's self-evident that they're not. He explains, in the world to come, we'll speak that name, and they'll pick up a Bible, and they'll see the vowels of the name itself, which are Shachak, Shva, Cholam, Kamatz. Unequivocal that this rabbi is saying the name is Yehovah, not Yahweh, not Yahuwah. And he wrote to a rabbi in Poland named Maharam of Lublin, also known as Mayor of Lublin. He's a very famous rabbi, the Maharam of Lublin, and he wrote a response to Shabtai Sofer. So he says, know, my beloved, how extremely difficult it is to put things like this in writing, and even more so a letter sent about from place to place, concerning the vowels of the Tetragrammaton, which are Shva, Cholam, Kamatz.
He openly says it.
He openly says it. It says, I found in the words of my grandfather, our teacher, Rabbi Asher Lemel, head of the Beit Din of Krakow, he wrote a holy book called Emek HaBracha, but because of its immense holiness, it was never printed, that it not be used by those who are not worthy. And then he quotes the book of his grandfather. I'm not going to go into it, but I'll read it. Why not? So this is what it says in chapter 34. He's quoting the book of his grandfather verbatim. And it says, concerning the Tetragrammaton, its vowels received from Sinai are Shvach Olam Kamatz. There's no room for Yahweh here. It's Yehovah, according to these rabbis.
I thought this research from Nehemia Godon was really interesting. He found ancient rabbis passed down the secret vowels of the Tetragrammaton in a ceremony every 7 years, and they used mnemonics to help remember the correct vowels. Also, it's interesting that Nehemia is a Jewish researcher and not a Jehovah's Witness, yet his research still led him to finding the missing vowels of the Tetragrammaton were Shva, Kalam, Kamatz, making God's name Yehovah, not Yahweh. That means Jehovah's Witnesses are mostly correct in the name they use. They are sadly still incorrect because they call God Jehovah instead of Yehovah. Jehovah is a later Latinized version of Yehovah. The name Jehovah first appeared in translations of the Bible in the Middle Ages in the Latin-speaking world. Even though the name Jehovah originated from the correct name Yehovah, that still means they are incorrect to use it because that is not God's name. The name is Yehovah, not Jehovah, because the first Hebrew letter of the Tetragrammaton is Yud, which is the Y in Yehovah. There is no letter J in the Tetragrammaton. So for any Jehovah's Witnesses that may watch this video, if getting God's name correct is important to you, then I hope from now on you call him Yehovah, not Jehovah. It's similar to how we call Yeshua Jesus, even though if we were walking around in that place and time and asked if people knew Jesus, they wouldn't have any idea of who you were talking about because Jesus was not his name. Meaning Christians use the incorrect name for God and for Yeshua. That's all for today, so thank you for watching. This has gave us something all to reflect on. If you wish to see the original video that featured Nehemia Godon, I'll put the name of the channel and the video link in the description. Let me know what you think in the comments, like and subscribe.